Hi everybody and welcome to this beginner's guide to using Agisoft Metashape Pro for photogrammetry. Okay, so just a quick overview of the software. It takes photographs and turns them into 3D objects as we discussed earlier on in the session. Just to give you a quick outline of what's what on screen, this area that we're looking at now is kind of the window where all your outputs will appear, whether that be checking camera alignments, whether it be checking individual cameras, things like the 3D models, and where we do any work on the data that is produced from the images. The workspace on the left here is where we place the images and where we can keep tabs on which stage we're at of the modeling process. And then at the top we've got some toolbars, so the menus and the tools down the bottom that we'll look at as we kind of move further through the through the process. So to begin with, what we want to do is bring the first load of photographs in that we've taken. So we click on Workflow and we click on Add Folder, and then we select the folder that contains the first group of images. So in this case, it's top. So we'll select that. We'll choose single cameras because we want all of the cameras in one chunk as opposed to a dynamic scene made up of loads of individual cameras. So we click OK. And you can see the image is imported in the bottom here. And at this point in time, it's worthwhile right-clicking on this chunk, renaming it to something that is a little bit more meaningful. So we'll call it bowl top in this instance. From there, it makes sense to add the remainder of the images. So what we'll do here is we'll right-click in the workspace, we'll click on Add Chunk. We'll rename that by right-clicking on it, and we'll call it bowl bottom. And then with that selected, you can see that it's selected because it's bold. We'll click on Workflow, we'll click on Add Folder, and then we'll add the second set of images. Again, single cameras, click OK, the images import. It's useful to note that obviously you can see the thumbnails at the bottom here, but if you wanted to check details, if you double click on an image, you can see that we can take a quick look at it and make sure that everything's where it needs to be. Okay, so now we've got our images imported and we can see that 0 of the cameras are aligned. So what we want to do is going back to the first chunk, bold top, we double click to select that, we click workflow and we click on align photos. The default settings here that you see on screen are perfectly adequate for the type of object that we're doing here. If the object's small and very detailed, you might change this to high or highest, but just be aware that your outputs are bigger and more detail means a slower processing time. So we'll keep those as default for this. Everything else is completely fine, and we'll click on OK. The processing will begin, and we'll pick this back up in a second when the processing is finished. Okay, so something that I've quickly done off screen is just to click on File and Save As, and save the project in a meaningful location with a meaningful name. Ignore my file name in Logic during this presentation because I've saved it as various stages in order to mean that you haven't got to sit and watch it process for 45-50 minutes at certain points. So we've aligned the cameras 62 are aligned for the top of the bowl. We'll come back and do the bottom after we've finished all the processing points for the top ones. You'll see why a little bit later on. So here on screen now we have what we call the sparse cloud, which is just the software interpreting where it's seeing the points, but not in a detailed fashion. It still needs to build that. The little globe that you can see on screen allows us to drag and rotate the model in the direction based on the lines on the globe. To check our camera alignment, what we can do here is we can go up to the toolbar and we can click on Show Cameras. And then if we use the mouse wheel to zoom out, you can see that we've got a nice dome shape. We've got good coverage of every area, which is what we're looking for at this stage. So once we know we're happy with that, we can turn those cameras off again. And we go up to Workflow and we click on Build Dense Cloud. Again, for this artifact, medium is perfectly fine. Calculate point colors is on, calculate point confidence is on, depth filtering is mild. Again, these standard settings are perfectly adequate for the bowl. So we go ahead and click OK, and then we pick back up when this is finished processing. Okay, so the processing's finished, and we're back at this screen again. You can see that we've now in the workspace got a dense cloud listed. Just before you do anything else, just make sure you click on File and Save, just so we don't have to repeat any of the drawn out processing points. Double click on that dense cloud, and that will give you something that resembles a 3D object. Now, it's not strictly a 3D object in the literal sense yet, because it's just made up of a series of dots. It's just those dots are so close together that from a reasonable distance away, it looks like the finished article. What we want to do now is clean up the information on this dense cloud so that we've only got the object that we want to capture, which is the bowl. So again, making sure that we're selected for navigation, we rotate the object until we get it in a position where we can start cleaning up. Now, because this is a round object, that we can use the circle selection tool on the selection button on the tab here and pick a point roughly in the middle, left mouse click and hold it down, and then drag until we've encased as much of the subject that we want to retain as possible, and we let go, and that selects that. Now we want to keep the selection and lose everything that's around and outside of the selection. So to do that, we click on crop selection here. That takes that away. Now we click back on the arrow for navigation, and we can have a little look around and see what we've got left in terms of points. Now we can see here that we've got some extra points at the bottom, and we've got bits of the turntable when we don't want those. So what we need to do at this case is rotate the object around again until we are as level horizontally as we can be, and seeing such a very thin slice of the turntable. And then we'll use the rectangle selection tool for this and start nice and low because we want to get rid of all these points. We'll go up and then just capturing just above the top of the turntable there. We'll let go. And in this instance, we want to delete those points and we want to keep the bowl. So we click the delete selection button here like that. And that leaves us with a nice, neat point cloud that contains no extra points. Okay, so we're happy with that. So from there, we'll click on workflow and we'll click on build mesh. Now, because this object is going to be viewed in the virtual and doesn't need to be 3D printed, we can keep the face count fairly low. We just want the model itself to resemble the shape of the artifact. The textures are the things that are going to give it kind of depth and detail. If we were 3D printing an object, you would want to look at turning this up to high. You probably would have aligned the photos on high as well, just to give it the best chance of capturing all the nuances that you wanted to capture in 3D printing and replicating an object. But for the sake of this, we're going to click on low, click on advanced, again keep these all default, and click on OK. And then we'll pick up again once it's generated the mesh, and we'll talk about the next step. Okay, so that's finished processing, and you'll notice in the workspace we've now got a 3D model listed that has been built from the points that we cleaned up during the last stage. So double click the 3D model. It's got no texture at this point, which is why it looks a bit blurry, but that's something we'll sort out towards the end of the process. So again, just make sure that everything looks correct and that there's no missing points. And you'll see here we've got this kind of dull lip where there's kind of extra, where it's built some information based on what it thinks is happening there. Now we don't want that because we want to produce some nice masks of the images. So what we want to do is just orientate the model again so we get a nice clean cut on this. Making sure that the 3D model is selected, we click the rectangle selection tool again, and again coming from below because it's a little bit easier to kind of see where you need to go. Just select those points, click delete, go back to navigation, rotate the model, and just make sure that we've got a little bit of extra there, so we want to just get rid of those. Just to make sure everything is as neat as it possibly can be. So just a little bit more rotation. There we go. And again, we just select those, we click delete. You can spend a little bit of time on this if you want. It just makes things a little bit easier at the next stage. So just take your time, clean those points up, and we'll come back to this once the points are clean. So the model's cleaned up and all those extra points have disappeared. And the reason that we've done this is because we need to make some masks of the images. So to do that, select an image, right click on it, select masks and click on import masks. And we want to take the mask from the model and the operations replacement, and we want to apply it to all cameras. Tolerance is fine, we can leave these as they are, and then click on OK. Doesn't take too long to process the masks. Now if we double click on an image, you can see there that it's perfectly selected the outside of the bowl. Now if we want to refine this because an edge is a little bit dodgy, we just need to go back to the stage where we were just chopping bits off the model, but you can see here that we've got that exactly as we need it to be. So from there, what we need to do is repeat the same process with the bottom chunk. So we double click on it, we select the cameras, we click on workflow, and we begin the align photos process. And we go through the aligning of the photos and the building of the dense cloud, but we stop short of making a mesh. So I'll pick this video back up when those stages are complete. If you're not sure or you can't quite remember, just refer back to earlier points in the video and we'll go from there. So from there, if we double click on the dense cloud for the top of the bowl, you can see that they're in different locations. So what we need to do at this point in time is align these dense clouds. Now, before we go ahead and do that, we don't need this 3D model anymore. So right click on it and click on Remove Model. Okay, so now ensuring that we've got both of the chunks selected by holding down Shift and clicking on both of them, we click on Workflow and we click on Align Chunks. So what we want here is to make sure that we've selected both the chunks. We want it to be point based because we're going to be using the point clouds to align these up. We want the accuracy to be high, and the key point limit needs to be equal or greater than adding the sum of these 2 points up together. So we'll keep it at 150,000. That's fine. We also at this stage want to make sure that we apply those masks that we made earlier on onto the key points. If we don't do that, when we finish processing at this stage, which is gonna on something this big is gonna take potentially up to an hour, we end up with a load of noise. We basically will put the turntable back in, and we don't want that. Once we've got the settings as we want them to be, and we click on OK, the software will begin to detect the points that match between the two chunks, and we'll essentially align them into the same area, giving us what should look like an accurate representation of what we've taken photos of. Now this stage can take a while, so it might be a good idea at this point to have a break and just give yourself a little bit of time away from the screen and come back to it once it's finished. Okay, so after all that processing time, you can see here on display I've got the dense cloud for the top of the bowl. What we want to do here is double check to see where it's put the other chunk for the bottom of the bowl. So we on the toolbar click up here and click on Show Align Chunks, and you can see that it puts the two chunks together on display for us, and we can see that the bowl looks correct. So once we're happy with that and we know that the positioning is where we want it to be, what we need to do now is combine these two chunks together, giving us one point cloud that contains all of the information for both of the chunks. So to do that, we make sure we've got both of them selected. We click on Workflow and we click on Merge Chunks. Again, just double check everything's selected, and we want to merge the dense clouds. We don't need to worry about the depth maps because we're not using those for this particular project. So we just click on OK and we wait for a little bit more processing time to pass. This one doesn't take a massive amount of time, so we'll carry on in real time with that. I can then select the merged chunk and the dense cloud from that, and that's what we've now got on the screen. We can just turn merge chunks off to turn the other ones off, and now you can see there what we've got is something that really is starting to represent the finished piece. Okay, so we're happy with that. Next stage is workflow and build mesh. This is going to take the point cloud and turn it into a 3D mesh made up of, in this instance, nearly 140,000 triangles, which might sound like a lot, but is actually quite low for something this size, and at this detail, I should say. Again, just follow all of the same settings that we did earlier on when we made the original 3D model of the top of the bowl, and then click OK. And again, a little bit of time will elapse while this is processing, so just bear with it and pick back up in a few minutes. We've now got a 3D model of the bowl complete. So if we wanted to take that now and drop that into some meshing software to allow us to just make sure that it's watertight and there's no holes in it and things like that, so we can 3D print it, we could do that at this stage. But for this project, that's not what we're going to do. We want to take a look at the mesh by clicking up here on the toolbar. Let's just take a look at the model as a solid object, so you can see that's how that looks. We can see a shaded version. Now it's using the colors from the points as opposed to the actual photographs, which is something that we don't really want. We want something that's got quite a lot of high fidelity. So what we're going to do now is we're going to texture the model using the photographs from the merged chunk. So to do that, we click on workflow and we click on build texture. In terms of the settings here, you leave them as they are. You can, if you really want to, up this number here, but that's currently set to 4K, and pretty much every device that anybody's going to use isn't going to be any greater than 4K. So leave that where it is and then click on OK. And Agisoft will then go through and, using these photos, build a really detailed texture for the object. Now the texturing process is complete, we want to take a little look at the model with the texture on. So we go back up to the model button here, and we click on model textured, and that loads the textures in. And you can already see there just what a difference using the photos makes over using the colors of the points. Don't forget at this stage just to quickly save the project. You don't want to be losing any of your hard work and waiting for processing times to happen all over again. Okay, we've now got a model that we're happy with. We're pleased with the textures. It's an accurate representation of the object that we photographed. So what we want to do is export that, ready to move that elsewhere for other people to view. So we click on File, we click on Export, and we click on Export Model. We choose a save location and give the object a meaningful name. And we click on Save, and that will open this dialog box. We want to make sure that we click the Export Texture button and change the texture to a PNG. You can change this comment if you want. I tend to just leave it as is. The coordinate system isn't massively important. We'll leave it as meters, but because we've got no points of reference in the photographs to be able to accurately dimension the model, we're going to look at sorting that out when we move it into a space where other people are going to view it. So at that stage, we can click OK, and the export process happens. And that's that for Metashape at this point. I hope this video has been useful and you've got some basic knowledge on how to use the software. If you need to contact me, I'll be leaving my contact details with you during the classroom session, and I'm happy to be on hand to assist with some modelling when you're in the room itself doing the work for real. Okay, bye for now.